A key area of Facil is to keep track of the training classes that you offer, register people for those classes, collect any fees or deposits, and of course indicate when they've completed the class. And in general, these classes are associated with certification to use certain equipment. Most organizations offer an orientation class and then go on into training for the use of different kinds of equipment, and that training is related in Facil to a person's permission to use the equipment. So let's look at the class schedule and registrations form in Facil. 2 buttons at the top, one to see the schedule and one to see the registrations for an individual class. Now, of course, the class schedule is going to list each class that has been set up, including information about, let's move in a little closer, about the class start time and date. And here you'll notice it says June 1st, 2002, 7 p.m. Saturday. Important to understand that this is the starting time of the class. Classes may run over a period of several days. Maybe they meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Maybe they meet every Monday for 4 weeks. Whatever the schedule of the class is, this is the start time and date of the first meeting of the class so that the classes appear in chronological order. The next item is the certification, which is another way of saying what class is this. Again, generally this is associated with being certified to use some particular equipment. That's why it's called a certification. Here, for example, it says Studio Basics, and ordinarily that would be the kind of class you would take before you're allowed to use the studio. If we look down at a couple of the others, we see examples such as Field Advanced to use field equipment, VHS editing, and here, of course, is an orientation class that everyone is supposed to take. So those are just typical examples of the way you might define your classes. And of course, all of this is user definable. Facil doesn't have built-in names of classes. You decide all that when you set up the system. If we move a little further to the right, there's a larger field for the meeting schedule of the class. This is a description of the class. And here's where we get into where the class meets, if it meets on multiple dates, and so on. So if the class does in fact meet Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the first date and time that we already saw would show that first Monday and the start time, and then here it would say Monday 7 to 9, Wednesday 3 to 5, whatever the schedule of the class is, where it meets, and anything else you want people to know about the class. This appears on printed class schedules, and it appears on the registration form that we can give to people when we sign them up for the class. So if they're supposed to bring a work tape, if they're supposed to bring their lunch, whatever it is, put all the information you want here in the meeting schedule field. And that's a memo field that's infinitely long. You notice it has scroll, so you can put as much information as you want in there. Slide back to the left again to look at the second row of information. There are several figures here that show us first the fee for the class in dollars, and then the deposit in dollars. The difference between a fee and a deposit, both are amounts that you're going to collect from people when they sign up from the class. A deposit, generally, we're saying that would be refunded. And a lot of organizations collect deposits as a way of ensuring that people attend the class even though they don't want to keep that money. A fee, on the other hand, implies this is money we're going to keep. You're paying this, you take the class, and that's the charge for taking it. But you could have both. You may, for example, only charge $10 to take the class, but you might want a $50 deposit to make sure people show up. So you could put $10 fee, $50 deposit. When they sign up, you would collect $60. When they've attended the class, you would refund the deposit. So whatever combination you want of fee and deposit, you can simply enter those two amounts here, collect all the money when they sign up. When they're done, if they are entitled to a refund of the deposit, or if they cancel the class and get a refund of the fee. Either way, whatever amount is necessary, you can refund. Okay, the last two fields in the class definition, the capacity of the class, which is simply the number of people you're going to allow. Here it's 12, 8, and so on. And then a field that we call held. A lot of our users have asked for this. It's a way of setting aside some spaces without signing anyone up. In other words, maybe you have room for 12, but you know you're expecting 5 people from a certain organization to sign up. You haven't registered them yet. You could put 5 in here that would hold those 5 spaces, and then you would be able to register 7 more people. Now, when the 5 people do show up to register, you would remove that held number and go ahead and register them. So it's a way of temporarily holding, setting aside some spaces until you actually register the people. The last 2 pieces of information here are not filled in by you, they're calculated. One is how many spaces are filled, in other words, how many people are registered, and then in bold, how many spaces are still open. If we look at our third one here, which is an orientation class, there's no charge for that class. It has room for 30 people, no spaces are being held. 5 people are signed up already, so there are 5 spaces filled, and 25 spaces are still open. The last field is the instructor, and that's selected from your defined staff list. So you do need the instructors to be on your staff list so you can indicate who's teaching the class. Okay, so we have a chronological list of all the classes. If we look up at the top here a little bit, we'll see there are 2 controls. One, select cert code, the other, show classes after, and that's a date. What these 2 do is allow you to control how much you see of the classes on the schedule. Because Facil keeps all the records historically, over a period of years, you could have thousands of classes listed in your schedule that took place in the past and are scheduled to take place in the future. So these 2 tools allow us to look at either just one kind of class by selecting a particular cert code, and also to control the first date. And here you see it says show classes after 5/22, and the first class after 5/22 takes place on 6/1. If we clear that, now we see the list starts with classes going back to 2/22, 2/24, and so on. And our future classes, or our classes after that date, are further down the list. I'm going to put the number back to today's date, 5/22, and there's the next class again. The historic classes are hidden so that you don't have to wade through a list of thousands of classes. And then the other choice, as I said, is to select one kind of class or one cert code. We'll select orientation, and now we see only the orientation classes that are taking place after 5/22. So that pretty well covers the schedule. If we look over in the upper right corner of the form, we'll see that there are several buttons for reports. And of course, there's a button for new registration, and we're going to cover that next, how to register people for the class. This shows a roster report for the selected class. This button allows you to do an instant mailing to persons for the selected class, persons who are registered. So if something comes up, maybe it's a change of location or you're going to cancel the class, you can quickly contact everyone who has signed up for that class, either by paper mail or email using the Facil mailing system. And we'll cover all of how that works in detail elsewhere in this training video. And the last report, or the last button here, takes us to the class report menu, and that'll let you do things like print your entire schedule to post of all the classes that are being held in the future. It lets you print multiple class rosters and other kinds of data reporting about the classes and the people signed up for the classes. One last detail, while we're over here on the right-hand side, you can see that there's a place for a note, and even though this is a very small field, you can put as much information as you want in there by just clicking the little edit button, and you can add as much text as you want about the class, about things that are going on, and this is just for your use to keep track of any little details. And last but not least, let me clear the class type so we see all the classes. Okay. There is a space here, none of these are filled in, but there's a space here for the prerequisite. Again, this is explained in the Facil help file, but basically what it means is that when you define your classes before you schedule them, you can determine that one class is a prerequisite of another. In other words, you couldn't take the advanced studio training until you've already taken the basic studio training, and so on. Very common requirement. And by setting that up in your class definition, then it'll say here on the schedule what the prerequisite is. So if you look at advanced studio training and basic studio training as a prerequisite, it will say that right here. The function of that in Facil, aside from showing it to you on the schedule, is that when you go to register people, Facil will actually check and see if they've successfully completed the prerequisite class, and if they have not, it will give you a warning. So it allows you to define and enforce requirements for taking a prerequisite class. Okay, let's back out on the shot a little bit so we can see the whole form. And again, we've dealt so far just with the schedule of classes, and you can schedule as many classes as you want, as far into the future as you want. Now let's register people for the class. Here's our example class orientation. We see there are 5 people already registered and 25 spaces open. The second button on the form, class registrations, will take us to that page. And of course, that shows us the registrations for one class. And which class? Obviously, it's the one that we've selected here in the schedule. So wherever the cursor is, it's on this one right now, we click class registrations. Here it repeats the information about the class, that it's the basic orientation, the date, the meeting schedule information, everything that was on the schedule. And here's our list of the 5 people that are already registered for the class. Let's look at the information that's shown about each class registration. Person ID number, a link button to take us to that person's person form if we want to see detailed information, of course their name. There are 2 checkboxes for earlier and certified, and I'll discuss that in a second. Paid, dollars paid, is the total amount that that person has paid to attend the class. That would include any fee and deposit. Now this particular class, we can see up here in the description, has no fee or deposit, so naturally no one has paid anything. We'll look at how that breaks down in a little bit when we review the payments. This button links us to more information about the payments. Of course, no one has paid anything, so that wouldn't be used right now. The next button is to take an additional payment beyond what you took from them when you registered for the class. And then we have, again, a note field. And this note field lets you put in as much information as you want about this person and their registration for the class. Perhaps they have some special need in the class, or you want to make some note of what happened when they took the class. Maybe they weren't certified, they didn't complete the class successfully. You might use this note field to record why they were not certified. Whatever information you want, as much of it as you want for each class registration. Now, there is a little more information, details about the registration, and if you want to see that detail, we would click this button, and you'll notice what happens is a second line of information appears for each registration, and here are the labels of what that is. Canceled date, of course that is only filled in if they've canceled, who registered them, and the date and time they were registered. If you're not interested in seeing that information, now we're looking at just the basic registration information. So that gives you a little more flexibility in using the form, hides the information that you don't need all the time, but it's there with one click if you do need it. Cancel date, registered by, and date time registered. Okay, let's go back to these 2 checkboxes and talk about that for a second. One checkbox is titled earlier, the other is titled certified. Now, this class hasn't taken place yet, so obviously no one is certified. When the class is over, we would go back to this and select each person who is certified. There would be a checkbox there, and that's how we know they completed the class successfully. Because in most situations, we hope this is true for you, pretty much everybody who takes the class becomes certified. There is a shortcut for this, and if we pan to the right just a little bit, there is a button in the upper right corner, along with these others. That's the button I want you to see, Certify All. And that simply means check everybody on the list as certified. If you have 30 people registered for a class and 29 of them completed it successfully, the thing to do, of course, is to click Certify All and then go back and find that one person and take the checkbox or the check out of their certified box. Saves you 29 clicks to mark everyone. So it's very simple. I can just say Certify All, and you do get a little warning here. It says you're sure you're doing this because it's a big change. Individual person certifications may still be edited later. Okay, there everyone is checked, and now if one person didn't complete, I would just uncheck that one person, And again, you get a warning because this is a significant change. So it's that easy to keep track of the certifications. Okay, what about earlier? What is the purpose of that? Class spaces are a valuable resource, just like your equipment and facilities are a valuable resource, and we want to maximize the use of them by filling as many of those spaces as we can. So if people are signing up for a class, maybe it's your orientation class, for example, like we're talking about here, and maybe you hold it every 2 weeks, let's say. Someone wants to sign up, you look, you say, well, the orientation is filled for 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, and you sign them up for 8 weeks from now. At the time you register them, you're going to ask them, if an opening becomes available in one of those earlier classes, do you want to take an earlier class? And that's what this checkbox is. So by asking that question when the person signs up, would you like to move to an earlier class? If a space becomes available, you check the box. Now, if a space does become available, it's simply a matter of looking at the registration list for the next class, starting with the people who said they wanted to take a class earlier, contact them and ask them if they want to move into the earlier class. To make this easier to do, let me save that certification change I made. There are two things about moving people to another class to help you move people to those earlier classes and fill your spaces. One is, if we click the details, we keep track of the date and time that each person registered, and you'll notice that by default, this list is shown in chronological order. In other words, in the order in which they signed up for the class. So to do a first come, first served, and I know there's a space now in an earlier class, I would simply look at the first person on the list where earlier is checked. They're the first person that signed up. I can contact them, and of course I can jump to their person form with a click and get their phone number and so on and so forth. When I contact them, they say, yes, I would like to move to the earlier class. If we scroll up a little bit, there is a button that says simply move. Up a little further, and there it is, the button that says move. Whatever person I'm pointing at, right now I'll just point at this first person, and I'm ready now to move them to an earlier class. I click the move button. Oh, they're already certified. Too late to move them. Let's turn that off. Now let's see if we can move them. Okay. Okay, let's back up just enough to see this new dialog. This is move the registration to another class. It shows you a list of the classes of the same kind that take place either earlier or later, all the available classes of the same kind. And now I can pick any one of these other classes simply by touching that record and then click Save Move, and it will move that person's registration from their current class to a different class, a different date of the same kind of class. I'm going to cancel this. So it's very easy by looking at the date people signed up, looking at the earlier checkbox, yes or no, and using the move button to keep your class spaces filled and backfill them from future classes when spaces become available. So every time someone calls and cancels, if you know that your classes are full, you can just go to the next class, find the first person, call them. Makes it as easy as we can make it. Okay, what we haven't done is register people for the class, and obviously that's fundamental. So let's back up a little bit and look at how we register someone for a class. There are two buttons, one on the registration list itself that says new registration. So if I'm looking at the list of people, I can click new registration and add someone to the class. If I'm looking at the schedule, let me slide this over. Here's our schedule. I can do the same thing from here. Again, new registration. So there's a new registration button on both pages, on the schedule page and on the class registration page, and it doesn't make any difference which place you do it from, whatever is convenient. So if I want to add someone to this class, obviously I put the cursor on the class that I want to register someone for, and then I just click the new registration button. And what do I have to do? Obviously, I have to pick the person I want to register. Pick it the same way you would for any other purpose. And here's the person I want to register, Mickey Montague. I get any person notices that have been set for Mickey Montague. And then I get the class registration form. Very simple. Person's name, what class it is. Here's that question. Do you want to move to an earlier class if possible? We won't let you forget to ask the question. It's right there on the form. You can set it to yes or no, and the box will be checked or not appropriately. And all I have to do is click Save the Registration. There are two other things I can do here. One is to print a registration reminder form, and the other is to print an envelope with that person's address. If we're doing this over the phone, perhaps we want to mail them their registration form. That registration reminder or class registration form shows all the information about the class, just like this: person's name, when they signed up, what classes, the whole schedule information, and again, you can put whatever you want in that schedule information. So by putting in there, bring your work tape, bring your lunch, show up 5 minutes early, whatever information you want, that'll all print on the registration reminder form that you're going to give them. And then, of course, we just click Save. If this box is checked, it'll print the registration reminder. I'm going to uncheck it, and I'm going to save the registration, and it's done, and you notice the number changed. It was 5 filled and 25 open. Now it's 6 and 24. If we go back to the class registration list, there's Mickey Montague, and of course he's the last person on the list because he's the last person that registered, and the list is in chronological order. So it's that simple to register somebody. I'm going to do it one more time without narration, and you'll see how quick it is. I'm looking at the class, new registration, pick a person. That person was already in the class, so of course we got a warning. Pick a person here, click Save, and it's done. That easy. Let's talk about how you collect money using Facil. There are two different areas of Facil for collecting money. One is when you collect money for classes, and the other is to collect money for anything other than classes. And what would that be? It could be materials, videotape, it could be promotional items, t-shirts and coffee mugs, could be membership fees, it could be contributions. Whatever you collect money for, Facil allows you to set up a catalog of items and have a regular point of sale system, issue receipts, issue refunds, track how much you've sold of each item. It's all handled. But in almost every organization, one of the places that you collect money for is when you register people for classes, whether that's a fee or a deposit. And in order to make it as easy as possible and not have you go through two steps, the collecting of money for classes is built into the class registration process. It's very similar to the way you would collect money for materials or other fees, but it's built into the class registration process so that you can do it all in one step. So we're going to start with that. We're going to start with the class registration process where you collect fees. After we've gone through that, then we'll look at other ways, or the other way of collecting money for materials and so on. So let's start by looking at the class schedule and registration form. This is the same place we looked about registering people for classes, but in our first example of registering someone, there was no fee. No money was involved. Now I'm going to point at a different class. This is the Edit VHS class, and this particular class has both a fee and a deposit. If we zoom in just a little bit on the left side, you'll see that it says $8 for the fee, $10 for the deposit. We're using both a fee and a deposit so that you see the whole system. What that would mean is that in this case, when a person signs up for the class, they have to give you $18, and when they complete the class, $10 would be refunded. You can use either one separately, or both, or neither one, whatever suits your purpose. Okay, I'm going to click the new registration button just like I did before, and here's our place to pick the person. I'll pick someone, and now we'll zoom out, and here is the registration form. This is the same registration form that we saw a little earlier, starting with the person, the class, do they want to move to an earlier class if possible, that question, the save button, the registration reminder. The area that was blank before now has the information about payment. So let's just review this section where we collect our payment. You'll notice that the payment amount is already filled in at $18 because that's the total of the $8 fee and the $10 deposit. That's the amount we would normally collect. We start out by asking a question. Should this person pay for this class? In order to allow as much flexibility as possible, you have the choice of collecting, in other words, the person does pay, or you can waive the fee, and that would be your scholarship situation, or you have a hardship rule that certain people don't have to pay. And the third choice is you can defer the fee or deposit. In other words, I want to register the person for the class, and yes, I am going to get money from them, but I'm not going to get it right now. I'm going to sign them up, and they're going to, quote, owe the money. Okay, so there are three choices. Pay now, waive it altogether, I do not expect to collect the money, or defer the fee or deposit. Yes, I will collect the money, but I'm not collecting it right now. And all we do is pick which of those it is. Now, of course, we'll start with pay because that's the most common situation. So that's filled in by default. Pay, the total amount is filled in by default, $18. And then we have the payment method. The default is cash, but now I can also select check or credit card. Let's just leave it at cash for right now. So all of this is filled in by default. I don't have to fill anything in. If I'm collecting the full amount in cash, it's all filled in already. I can make a note here if I need to. Unlikely that you would on a cash payment, but if it's a check or a credit card, you might want to add some other information. But let's just go ahead and save this registration. I'm not printing the registration reminder by choice. I could print it or not. But you'll notice I did get a printer message there, and that's because when you collect money, Facil prints a receipt for the financial transaction, and that is not optional. We want to make sure that a printed receipt is available for every financial transaction. You can also set Facil to print multiple copies of each receipt, and in fact that's pretty typical. Most organizations want at least 2 copies of the receipt, obviously one to give to the client who's paying you the money and the other to keep for your records. So now if I go and look at the class registrations, I see here that one person has paid $8 and this person, the one we just registered, paid $18. You'll notice the color highlighting here. The gray, okay, I don't have a printer here, so that's why I got this message from printing the financial receipt. I'll just throw that away. You'll notice here that the person who's paid $8, which is the fee, is gray, because that's where everybody should end up. If the fee for the class is $8, when all is said and done, we should have collected $8 from each person. So that's the normal situation. This person, on the other hand, where we've collected $18, which is the fee and the deposit, we actually owe them $10 because we're supposed to refund that $10 deposit at some point. So that's highlighted in green. Okay, I'm going to make another registration just real quickly here. I'll just pick anybody. And I'm not going to collect the money now. I'm going to waive their payment. When I say waive, I get a new dialogue. Instead of how much money am I collecting and is it cash and so on, since I'm not collecting money, we say, why are you not collecting money? Okay, this is a scholarship. That's my reason for waiving it. I save it. Here's our new person. You'll notice that they've paid $0. That's correct because I just waived their fees. And it's highlighted in yellow because they've paid less than the fee. You'll also notice that over here in the note it says fee waived : scholarship. That's filled in automatically because I put in the reason. All of this would be on the receipt if money were collected. Okay, so now I have someone who's paid the fee, someone who's paid the fee plus the $10 deposit, someone who we waived the fee. Okay, I'm going to do one more, pick a different person, and this time I'm going to say defer the fee. That's all I have to do. Doesn't ask me any other questions. I save it. Okay, in the note, fee deferred, paid $0, yellow. So we know exactly what's going on with these 4 people. This person is even. This person, we owe them a refund of the deposit at some point. These people have paid less. Now that doesn't mean they owe us money. If their fee is waived, then that means we don't intend to collect the money. On the other hand, fee deferred, yes, we would expect to collect that money before the class or at the time of the class. Okay, so how do we deal with the rest of the process now? We know how to register the people. We know how to take their money. But we also need to be able to take additional money. For example, in the case of fee deferred, at some point we want to collect that $8. So we need to be able to go back to this and collect that $8. In the other case where we've collected $18 and we're going to refund the $10 deposit, we need to be able to do that. So I'm done with this right now. I go away, I come back next week, and now I want to deal with these further financial transactions. So I simply go to the class registration right here, find the person, look at it, say, you know what, we need to collect the $8 from this person, fee deferred. And he just came in and said, you know, I'm ready to pay that $8. Great. The $sign button, you know, as it pops up and says take additional payment. So now we're ready to collect an $8 fee from this person at a later time. Click. Here it is. Registration, additional payment, person, class, staff, amount. Now again, the total of the fee and deposit is 18, so that's what it says here as the default. But we don't have to collect 18. Maybe we just want to collect the 8. Okay, fine. Cash? No. Check. If it's a check, we have a place to put a check number. And we have a place to put a note, and we save it. Again, we got the receipt pop up to print a receipt. And now you'll notice that Billy Elliott shows that he's paid the $8. At this point, I might also choose to delete this from the note if I wanted to. So it's that simple to collect more money at a later time. Let's do our refund now. Here's our person who paid $18. Let's say that the class is over and they've completed the class and we want to refund their $10 deposit. The green link button shows us payment details and lets us issue a refund. Let's just deal with the payment detail part first. I'll click on this first one who paid $8, and I want to know when did he pay the $8, how did he pay the $8, to whom did he pay the $8, did he pay it all at once, or did he pay $4 one time, $4 another? I want to know all about it. I just click this button. I'm going to get a new form, and this is a great big form. Let's back up so we can see the whole thing at once. This is the transaction details, payments, totals, refund, everything you want to know about a transaction. I came to here from the list of registrations by clicking the payment detail link button, and here is the record of that $8 payment. It tells me when, tells me what it was for, that it was $8. If I look down here, person who made the payment, it was cash. If there was a note about the payment, if there was a credit card number, a check number, any detail like that, they would all show here who took the payment, everything I need to know about that payment. Now, what's going on up here with all of this? This is a form that lets us view all the transactions, and these are the specifications or criteria that let us pick which transactions we're viewing. Now, you're going to learn a lot more as you've watched this entire training tape about viewers and how you look through lists of information and so on. But suffice it for now to say that when I clicked on the link button, this automatically was set up to show me this person's payment for this class. And you can see that right here. The person, what class it was for, and it shows their payment. If there have been multiple payments or refunds or other transactions, they would all be listed here, and we'll illustrate that. So let's just close this now. We'll be actually coming back to it in a second. Okay, we're back to our registration form. Now I'm going to click on the person who we have a $10 deposit from and ask for their payment details. Same form, new person, same class, collected $18. Now here is a button, refund. Whenever I'm looking at a transaction on this form, I can choose to issue a refund here. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of the refund right now because there are a lot of ways of doing it. It can get a little complicated. And we're going to be covering this when we talk about how to collect payments for other items. So for now, suffice it to say that I would click the refund button, process the refund, and it would indicate that on the list of transactions, and it would show the total here. Let's say, for example, now, and this is just an arbitrary example to show you what you can do. I collected $8 from this person, and now I want to collect another $4 for whatever reason. You can charge any person, any amount for any class. It's fully flexible under your control. So I'm just going to collect the additional payment button, and I'm going to collect $4. in cash, save it. Okay, done. How much have we collected from this person now? $12. But it was 2 separate payments. How would I know that? I would click on the payment details button, and there's the details of the 2 payments. Date, time, $8, $4, how it was paid. Maybe one was a check, one was cash. In fact, that's the case. That one was a check, and the second one was cash. All you need to know about the entire payment process for this registration. Can have any number of payments and refunds in it, so that you have complete flexibility in the way you handle the money associated with your classes. Okay, we just looked at taking payments in association with class registrations, but Facil allows you to take payments for any other defined items that you want. You may collect membership fees, you may be selling videotape or other materials, you may sell promotional items like t-shirts and coffee mugs, you may have, you want to collect contributions, any other type of financial transaction. Facil allows you to create a catalog of items that you sell or charge for in any number of categories, all the different tape formats and lengths at their different prices and so on, so that you have a complete sort of point of sale or cash register system that you can use, and it will tell you exactly how many of each item you sold, who you sold them to, total amounts collected, everything you need to know. How do you collect money? How do you process payments? On the main menu, we have a button marked Payments. The first question is, who are we collecting money from? We'll pick Emily Dickinson. And now we have a form where we can list all the items that Emily Dickinson is paying for in this transaction, be that materials, fees, contributions, any other payment. For each line, we have the category of item, which would be the general group of it. Is it materials? Is it a contribution? The general category, and then the specific item. There'll be a description, quantity, the price per unit, and the total price, because of course you might buy 4 videotapes at a time or 3 t-shirts. All right, so let's just start filling in. Here's our item categories, and of course all of this is definable by you. You can have as many different categories of items as you want, but typical examples: contributions, fees, materials, promotional. Let's do materials. Now when I click the item list, I get a list of tapes. This is only going to show me the items that are in the category I just selected. If I select materials, it will not show me fees in this list. And this is a very simple example. We only have 4 tape lengths and formats. Of course, you probably would have more, but let's just pick one here. It fills in the item number and the description of the item. Now I can select a quantity. Of course, it defaults to 1. We'll say 3. And you'll notice that it says here $6.45. That's the defined price for one of those tapes, and the total cost now is $19.35 3 times. At the bottom of the form, it's going to show us all the time what the amount in total of this purchase is, or this payment. Let's pick materials again. We'll pick a different kind of a tape. And they want 2 of those. And again, $27.27 is now the total amount of the transaction. So I can keep doing that. Now let me show you a little different circumstance. Here I have a category called contributions, and I'm going to pick annual capital campaign. That's one of the defined items of contributions we have. You'll notice that the price for annual capital campaign is set to 0, because some things don't have a fixed price, and a contribution, of course, would be an example of something that has no fixed price. When I select the item, you'll notice here that the unit price is blank. How much would you like to contribute? Any amount you want. We'll say $50. And it saves it, $50. Now we have $77.27. Now let's go back to the videotape, which costs $3.96, and say, you know what, let's change this to $4. No, that's not allowed. If a price is set in your catalog of items, then that's the price that has to be charged. Shouldn't be any other way. On the other hand, if you want flexibility in the amount you collect, in other words, it's up to, say in the case of a contribution, then you simply fill in a price of 0, as you saw on the list, a price of 0 in the catalog of items, and then Facil knows, well, if it says 0, that means you can collect any amount you want. So when the price is set at 0, you can fill in any price you want. When the price is set in the catalog, you cannot change it. So there's our total. We can add as many entries as we want to this list. None of this has been saved at this point. We are only building a list of items the person wants to buy. If they decide to make the $50 contribution and they say, oh, you know what, I don't have that much money, I want to give you the $50, but I don't want the tape. That's fine. We'll select that record by clicking on the record selector box. I hit the delete key, and it's gone. The amount is adjusted. So I can add to or delete from this list. I could edit the quantity, whatever I need to do until the list is correct and we know how much the person needs to pay us. Now I will fill in the rest of the transaction, which means how are they paying? And this looks familiar to you. This is exactly the same as filling in the transaction when we register somebody for a class. All we need is the payment method. If it's a check, it asks for a check number. If it's credit card, you still have a blank space here labeled credit card type and approval to fill in, Visa, MasterCard, and an approval code. We'll go back to check. I can fill in notes. So there's my transaction, all ready to go. Nothing has been saved yet until I click the button that says, of course, Save Transaction. Done. You saw the dialog box pop up to print a receipt, and it will list all the items that were covered in that transaction, how it was paid for, all the detail. Let's do another one without the commentary, just to show you how quickly it can be done. Click, person, materials, tape, to, check, save. That easy. So you have a complete flexibility there to sell or collect money for any purpose, whether it's materials, membership fees, contributions, promotional items, whatever you define. After you've collected your payments, for administrative purposes, you're going to want to be able to report and analyze the money you've collected and also be able to issue refunds. Refunds can get very complicated. People may want to return part of a purchase. You may want to give them part of their money back and not the full amount they paid. So we've tried to be as flexible as possible. That does make it a little more complicated, but this way you can handle any situation. And we're going to have a review now of how you do those refunds and how you generally look at your financial transactions. If we start at the main menu, we'll go to the admin menu. And on the admin menu, the first button in the upper left, Transaction Viewer and Refunds. And we keep this in the admin menu because it's not something you do routinely every day, and maybe only certain people do it. Here is the Transaction Viewer form. And you may recognize this from earlier when we showed how to see the payment record for a person who had registered for a class. And this tool lets us see any financial transactions that have been entered into Facil. In keeping with other viewers, the way it works is to have criteria at the top that you fill in, and then a list of all the records, in this case financial transactions, that meet the criteria you've set. Now the first criteria is a date range. In other words, all the financial transactions during that date range. By default, when you open this form, it's set to today's date. So in other words, when you open this form, what you're going to see by default is a list of today's financial transactions, and here they are. These are all the transactions we've been making in the taping of this instructional video today. As I look at each line, it tells me the date, time, exactly what the transaction was for. If it's a class registration, it says which class. Class, the name of it, and the start date and time, so you know which one it was. If it's materials, here it says tape and the type of tape. Annual campaign contribution, whatever description you have for your items. Of course, the quantity, the unit price, the cost. Here we have tapes, 3, $6.45 each, $19.35 total. So there's all those individual transactions. Now you'll notice it's not broken down by who it is or how they paid for it. This is each individual transaction. Below, it shows the payments. What's the difference between the payment and the individual transaction? Here, for example, a person paid for 3 things at once. 3 transactions, 1 payment. Class registrations tend to be 1 transaction, 1 payment. But a payment can include any number of transactions. So as I click through the list, I see the first class registration was done by Michelle, the next one by Billy Elliott, the next one also Billy Elliott for another payment for the same class, an additional payment. Here, these 3, notice as I click between them, this information stays the same because all 3 of these are part of 1 payment from 1 person. Okay? So as I touch every transaction, right here it tells me what the associated payment is. When the payment was made, who made it, who collected it, everything about it. Transaction here, payment here. Also, in the lower right is a summary of the listed transactions. Again, this is today's transactions because the date range is set to only cover today. So this is all of today's transactions. So the total I'm seeing down here is the total of today's transactions, which happens to come to $107.27. Okay, other choices, I can choose only to view the transactions for a certain person or only to view transactions for certain items. Now let's start by clearing the date criteria. And what that is going to do is allow us to see every transaction that's recorded because there's no restriction of date, no restriction of person, no restriction of category. I'm seeing every transaction recorded. And in our little demo, we don't have too much data, and the total of every transaction recorded, $482. And I can scroll through that list and look at them. You can see all the different dates and so on. Now, in order to filter this down, we started with selecting by date. Now let's select for a person. Same way of selecting a person, no matter what I'm doing. And there's all the transactions for this one person, Emily Dickinson. Here's all the transactions for Billy Elliott, and so on. That's simple. If I clear the person criteria, I want to see all the transactions for materials. So I select the category materials. And here's all my materials transactions. They all happen to be videotapes, but you notice they're different videotapes, a 180, a 120, different VHS. It's all materials. If I want to see even narrower, I want to see only the sales of these Sony Metallic 180. There they are. Only the sales of this one. There are none. Only the sales of this one, just the one, and so on. So I can narrow it down as much as I want. We'll go back to looking at today's date again. And you notice you can set the start and end separately. That way I can say all the transactions from a certain date until forever, or all the transactions before a certain date by setting just the start date or just the end date. While I'm looking at these, some of these are cash, some are credit card, some are check. Over here, I can filter by payment method. So click the cash choice, and I only see cash transactions. Check, only check transactions. Only credit card, don't happen to be any. And all the time I'm doing that, making any choices here, the total is showing here. So now it's very simple for me to say, today, how much did we take in cash? $22. I can look in the cash drawer, and there should be $22. How much did we take by check? $85.27. Excuse me. I can look at my bank deposit slip. It should say $85.27 in checks, and so on and so forth. Credit cards. So it makes it easy to analyze your financial transactions by date, by person, by category, by any combination of those, and also by payment method. The last criteria up here is to find a specific transaction by its receipt or refund number. And every transaction is numbered, and that number prints on the receipt. Now, when I say every transaction, I should say every payment has a number, which you can see here, and every refund has a number, and those numbers do not overlap. In other words, if there's a refund number 38, there will not be a payment number 38. It's one continuous set of numbers. So when I look at the paperwork and the person comes in and they have a receipt and it says number 32, all I do is type number 32 in there, and there's the records of the transactions that were covered by that payment. Same thing if it were a refund, I would just put the number from the form, from the receipt refund form, and I would be able to find it. So that's the last way of doing it. So all of those methods are available to find the transaction you're looking for. Let's go back to looking at today's transactions. Now, I have this list of transactions. This is where I can issue either a duplicate receipt or give a refund. If I want to issue a duplicate receipt for any transaction, I simply come to the form, find the transaction. If it was today, I could look at last week. I could find it by the person, whatever information I have to locate it. I locate the transaction, select it, click the receipt button, and it will duplicate the original receipt. If I want to issue a refund, here's my refund button here. Again, issuing refunds can be very straightforward if it's a simple situation, but it can also be more complicated. Let's start with a simple situation. Here's a person that paid $18 for a class registration, and I want to refund this now. Now, of course, I could also initiate this process from the class registration by clicking the link button to payments. It would bring me to this same form, and then I would click the refund button. So regardless of how I got to the form and how I located this transaction, once it's selected, I click the refund button. And here's my refund form. The refund form shows me the items in the transaction, in the payment. And because only one item was covered by this payment, there's only one record here. It shows the date, what it was, quantity, unit price, and the amount of the refund, which defaults to being the same as the amount of the payment. In other words, a full refund. You'll notice here I have three choices. I can refund the full amount, which is the default because that's the most common. I can refund none of the amount for this item, or I can refund partial. Now, why would I say refund and then click none? Because there could be multiple items here, and we'll do that in a minute, and you'll see you could refund one and not another. A partial refund means just what it sounds like. I can refund some of the money the person paid. Okay, but let's not talk about those more complicated situations quite yet. Let's just deal with refunding the full amount. I click the refund button, it comes up, it shows the amount, it says full refund. I look down here, it tells me about the original payment, who made it. It was $18, it was cash, and also the original receipt number. Now here, there are just a couple of fields to deal with for filling in the refund. The amount of the refund, that's determined by the list here. You'll notice that this is very similar to the list where we took a payment, where we sold a bunch of items. It's exactly the opposite. It works the same way in reverse. So I have a list of the items, how much they cost, and I answer the question about the refund and issue the refund the same way I had a list of items and collected the payment. So because the original payment was made in cash, the refund method defaults to cash, but they may have given you cash, you may want to give them back a check. That's fine. I'll just select check. Then I can put in the check number, which in this case is the check I'm writing to them. You'll notice that on the note field, it's already filled in original receipt number 44, so that when you issue the refund, which will have its own number, it refers back to the original transaction. So I've said he paid his $18 in cash. I'm going to give him a check for $18. I'll put in the check number, and I'll click Save Refund. Again, it prints a receipt, but this receipt says refund and shows the details of the transaction. Now, when I get back to my transaction list, it goes back to that automatically, you'll notice over here, it says that this payment of $18 was refunded this date and time. At the bottom of the list, because this is the most recent entry, it shows a new transaction for a quantity of -1 in red and -$18. That's the refund. Here's the payment, and it says it was refunded. Here's the refund transaction. You'll notice down here now, it still has the same total of amount we took in today, but now it also says we refunded $18, and then this is the net of the amount. There's my receipt not printing. And there's the amount of the gross, the refund, and the net. So again, today's financial transactions now include a refund, and this item is marked as refunded. Okay? Let's look at a couple of the more complicated situations, but we'll do it quickly. Here is a payment that covered several items. This tape and this annual campaign contribution. 2 items. And you'll notice we know it's the same payment because when we look at those 2 items, we see the same payment info. I click refund. Now I see both items listed. They were both covered by the payment. Again, a full refund is the default. This says full. This amount to be refunded is the same as the original. Same thing here. Total is the same as the total. He paid by check or she paid by check. We refund by check. And all I would have to do is put in the check number and say save refund, and I've refunded all the money. But let's take a different scenario. Let's say this person only wants to return 2 of the 3 tapes that they bought. Facil has the flexibility to do that. If we zoom in just a little so that we can see this upper area here a little more clearly, that's fine. And on this first item, tapes quantity 3, that's what was sold. But here we can fill in the refund quantity. Now you'll notice it says full. If I try and change this now, I'm hitting keys, which of course you can't see, and nothing is happening because it says give a full refund, and therefore that means 3. If I want to make this a partial refund, I have to say that specifically by clicking here. Now it's a partial refund, and here's the instructions, edit quantity and dollars. Now I can say what the refund is going to be. I'm going to give back 2, and if we slide to the right a little bit, we can see our price. Keep going. And now I would adjust this. Now you do have to do this manually, and the reason you do it manually is that you may want to refund some of the money, all the money, a different amount, whatever you want to do. So I know that what I want to do is refund $12.90, and I'm doing this in my head, which I probably should use a calculator, but that's the price of the 2 tapes. So I can pick my own quantity and my own dollar amount to refund. And when I do that, if we look down at the lower part now, we see that over to the left a little bit, we see that the amount has changed here. Say now it's $62.90 because that's the total refund. Oh, and they don't want any of their contribution back. Okay, these are both listed because they were both part of the same payment. But no, we're not asking for a refund of our contribution. We're glad to make that $50 contribution. Okay, so I select none for this item, and now you see we're just refunding $12.90. Oh, excuse me. If I'm keeping 2 and returning 1, this wouldn't be $12.90. This would be $6.45. Up to you to decide what the amount is that we're refunding. Price of 1 tape. There we go. Okay, and I'll move it, and here we go. So the total I'm refunding is $6.45. 1 tape. They're keeping the other tape, and they're not asking for any money back on the contribution. Actually, let's see, that would be the price of 1 tape we're refunding. Okay, now we're making sense. 1 item, $6.45, nothing here. So here's the essence of it. Full refund, no refund, or for this item, a partial refund. And no matter how many items we have here, we can set what we want, give back all, parts, some of the items, not other items, whatever you need to do. When we're done, we have the amount here, and we simply click Save and issue the refund. Need to fill it, because we're refunding by check, we need to fill in that check number. Okay, done. Again, it asks for the receipt. Now, if we back out a little bit on our shot, we'll see the amounts refunded. And we see right here, we refunded $6.45. See, here's our refund. It says that this was refunded on this date, and here's that $6.45 refund. Now, only because complicated things happen do we have to make the software a little more complicated so that it accommodates them. I've been told clearly by our users that sometimes people will bring something back for a refund. Let's say they have 6 tapes. They'll bring 2 back for a refund. 3 weeks later, they bring 2 more of that same purchase back for a refund. In other words, they got a partial refund on the transaction, and then they want another partial refund on the transaction. Facil lets you go there. Okay, let's go back to that same tape. Click refund again. And now, oh, sorry, that's not the same one. My error. Sorry, it's this one here. Now, when I look at the refund form, you'll notice that for this item, there is something filled in here in the middle now, previous refund. That's right. The person bought 3 tapes at $6.45 a piece, paid $19.35. They were previously refunded 1 tape, $6.45. That means there are 2 tapes worth $12.90. Now I can refund the $12.90, or I can refund 1 more of the 3, whatever I need to do. So I can refund part of an item and then go back to it at a later date and refund more of that item. So I have complete flexibility, full refund, no refund, partial refund more than 1 time, whatever is required. The only thing it will not let you do is refund more than the amount that was originally paid. It keeps you from doing that. So we have a completely flexible system now that lets you deal with the people who have changed their mind more than 1 time and make sure that all your numbers add up and that you have complete control over your money.